Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Ricardo Vieira, Director and Chief Curator of the Lehigh University Art Gallery's Teaching Museum. I would like to welcome you here to Dubois Gallery for today's talk about the photography of Aaron Siskind. Before introducing our speaker, Robert Mann, I would like to acknowledge two very special guests, Alice and Richard Fall. This exhibition of marvelous Siskind photographs have been made possible through multiple gifts from Dr. and Mrs. Fall. Thank you again, Alice and Dick. Thank you for your generosity. It is thanks to people like you that teaching collection like ours can prosper and grow. Thank you. Robert Mann has been a member of APAC, that is the Association International Photographers of Art Dealers since 1983 and served on the executive board for 12 years. He has taught lectures on collecting photographs and the history of fine art photography at educational institutions such as Vassar College and the School of Visual Arts. Robert has also participated in numerous panels, discussions, dealing with collecting, archival preservation, and evaluation of fine art photography. While directing the Long Gallery Graphic International Ltd. in Washington, D.C., early in his career, Robert Mann had the chance to work with photographers or the estate of photographers such as Adams, Ansel Adams, Bernice Abbott, Walker Evans, Robert Frank, Robert Mapplethorpe, and Yusuf Karaj. In 1983, he went on to direct the Light Gallery in New York City, where he represented artists like Andres Berthet, Harry Callahan, Richard Mirage, and Aaron Siskind. He also introduced 19th and early 20th century photography into the exhibitions and sales program. A few years later, he started his own operation, Photoman Inc., which is in 1991 became the Robert Mann Gallery. Today, the Mann Gallery exhibits worldwide and continue to showcase the art photography that include vintage work by master artists, mid-career contemporary artists, and younger emergency artists. The gallery is also quite active in brokering secondary market material and has become very involved in the consulting, building, and maintenance private collection. We are delighted that Robert Mann is able to be with us today to share with us his knowledge about American master Aaron Siskind. Welcome.
Thank you, Ricardo. Thank you, Susan, and special thanks to Richard and Alice, who are dear friends and have been for many, many years. And you've been trying to get me here for a long time, and here I am. I haven't had any technical briefing on the equipment here, so is this something that is intuitive? Is there a...
The clicker is on the keyboard, it's the left and right arrows.
And the keyboard is...
there's a tray below.
It slides out.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I don't do many of these, as you have probably just realized as I'm demonstrating. And I love to keep this informal and just say that interrupt me at any time if you have any questions. I'm here to talk about Aaron Siskind, but I'm also happy to talk about the gallery and the art world that I'm involved with, and any related questions that might come up. So, as Ricardo indicated, I started in the field in the mid-1970s. I began with one of the pioneering galleries and dealers of the day, which was a man named Harry Lund in Washington, D.C. And I had the privilege of being at the right place at the right time. I got to meet and work with people like Ansel Adams and Robert Frank, and Aaron Siskind. Of course, that came later, but I had no idea what I was getting into in the mid-'70s. And at that time, you could probably count on two hands the number of galleries in the entire world that were devoted to fine art photography. So it was just good luck for me that I started at a place that was helping to launch this whole industry. And I lasted there despite the fact that the gentleman I was working with was a complicated man. I lasted there 6 or 7 years, and then I was brought back up to New York, where I was originally from, and directed the Light Gallery for 2 years, which was a gallery more based on contemporary photography and not historical like at the Lund Gallery. And that's where I had the privilege of meeting Aaron Siskind. Aaron was one of the great artists of that gallery that really helped put that gallery on the map. And he and I developed a very strong friendship and a great working relationship. And so when I left Light Gallery, he left with me, as did a few other artists. And they came with me when I started my own gallery. And Aaron stuck with me until he passed away. And then for a number of years thereafter, I continued to work with his estate. And to this day, I still, while I don't represent the estate directly, I have significant holdings in his work. I still do exhibitions. I'm still considered a good source for both prints and for information. So I guess that's why I'm here to talk to you. My gallery is in Chelsea, and we've been in Chelsea now for, I think, nearly 19 years. This is our second location. We're on 26th Street, right near the High Line, and I'm in a building with a number of other galleries. And we alternate our exhibition programs between vintage prints or prints by master artists of the 20th century, like Aaron, like Ansel Adams, contemporary artists, some who I would say are mid-career, like Richard Misrak that Ricardo mentioned, Susan Rankaitis, Robert Flick, artists who have had museum exhibitions and numerous publications. And we also show emerging younger contemporary artists, people that we discover in many cases and try to launch. And so it creates a nice dialogue from show to show between these various periods of time and different styles of photography. But everything we do is all photo-based. This is an installation shot of the previous exhibition we had on Herman Leonard, who was one of the preeminent photographers of jazz musicians from the 1940s and 50s. And in a kind of loose way, his work relates to Aaron Siskind because Aaron, who many of you know was considered to be one of the abstract expressionists, well, that's a movement that was very much inspired by jazz. So I often think that jazz and photography, and especially the kind of photography Aaron did, go hand in hand. So a little history about Aaron. And actually, I'm going to interrupt myself and say that today is everybody's lucky day because I have brought some catalogs to share with the audience. I'm going to ask that you take one of each and pass them around. I think I have enough for everyone. I thought that this would act as a really good distraction for my inabilities as a public speaker. I'll give you a pass. There's 2 catalogs being passed out. I published both of these in conjunction with exhibitions I did for Aaron many, many years ago. The soft cover one is from an exhibition called Vintage Works. And if you open it up, you'll see in the beginning of the catalog some very small, what look like little snapshots. I think what's on the screen, some examples.
That's an extra.
Everybody got it?
Does everybody
You're
have
welcome.
one of each?
Okay, well, it's nice talking to you.
No, sorry. You guys have each 2? Okay, good.
So,
Let me
the very little pictures in the beginning of the softcover catalog, those are pictures that Aaron made with his first camera, with no experience, no formal training as an artist. He made them, he was given a camera as a wedding gift, and so a lot of these were taken on his honeymoon, and they were the very first pictures he took. Now, this is from a man who was basically a public school teacher. He taught English in the New York City public school system. He did not study art, but he innately came to working with the camera and making pictures right from the get-go, at least in my opinion. The pictures that you see, they show, jumping ahead a little. They show an eye for form, for structure, for framing, and they're in some ways a precursor to the more formal abstractions that will come later on. He loved taking pictures, and he became more and more entrenched in wanting to become an artist and give up teaching. Aaron also, he came from a Jewish Russian immigrant background, and so I think by nature he was a socialist at heart, probably even a closet communist. So he always bucked convention. He liked to do things his way. He liked to stir the pot. So he became involved early on with an organization in New York called the New York Film and Photo League, which was a group of photographers that had a strong social consciousness and wanted to use their art to help maybe make some changes, make some social reform in New York. Aaron became involved with the Photo League, and quickly became one of the leading elements of the Photo League, which meant that he started to organize other photographers and send them off on assignments. He championed one particular body work called the Harlem Document, where he did he and colleagues did an extensive amount of photographing in Harlem to try and show the rest of New York the poor housing conditions and what was going on that most people weren't even aware of. The compositions that he made, again, the way that he framed them, the way he framed the subjects, the way that he, I'm jumping ahead too far. They are, from an untrained eye, they're very accomplished. They show they show that this man had the ability to see and excel looking through the viewfinder in a way that wouldn't come to other people after even much training. So he's working with the Photo League for most of the mid to late 1930s and into the 1940s. And then he is slowly becoming interested in more detailed elements of architecture, of nature, of things that he's coming across either on the street or when he's vacationing on Martha's Vineyard. This was from a series called Tabernacle City, where he was photographing the vernacular architecture of Tabernacle City, which I believe is on Martha's Vineyard. And he is now being drawn, he's slowly evolving, his eye is being drawn more to these organic forms and to their shapes and to isolating them within the frame. And he's recontextualizing them. He's offering, this is not simply necessarily a photograph of a glove any longer. It can be representational of something else. It can be, there's many ways for anybody, depending on what you bring to a picture or any work of art, of how you'll interpret it. But here, he's isolating the glove on a wooden wall. It could be hanging, it could be flat. He's looking at the textures of the glove against the textures of the background, the dark shadowing between the fingers of the glove. He's looking at the tactile quality. So you see, he's bringing his lens closer to the subject, and he's starting to isolate things and look at them differently. And this is occurring now in the mid-1940s, and very quickly for him. His eye and his vision is evolving. And he's becoming more interested in looking at the world in a more abstract way. And so now this segues into him becoming involved with the abstract expressionist movement, which was going on simultaneous in the arts as in painting, with artists such as de Kooning and Franz Klein and Barnett Newman. How they are expressing themselves on canvas or in other mediums is how Aaron is now very quickly evolving to how he's expressing himself through his photography. So here we're looking at a picture of peeling paint, which has often been used to describe a way of a very boring aspect of life, watching paint peel. But the way he's framed it here, the way he's isolated these shapes and it's given the negative space to the background, assuming the black is the background, and it's a lighter colored paint that's peeling. He's looking at it in a different way. He's creating this volatility, this tension by cutting it really tightly in the frame. So it's around this time when this picture was made, in the late 1940s, that he's actually befriended by the abstract expressionists. Some of these key people who I mentioned who are in New York, they call themselves the Club. They used to hang out at a place called the Cedar Bar. They used to stay up all night drinking and smoking and arguing about politics and religion and art. And Aaron was quickly adopted as one of their own. There was no hierarchy. Oh, you're working in photography, we're painters, you're less. They became good friends. They considered him an equal. He helped them by photographing their artwork for catalogs. And it was relatively soon after he became part of this group that he was asked to exhibit with these artists. There were two galleries of the day in New York that were championing the abstract expressionist movement. One was Charlie Egan Gallery and the other was Betty Parsons. They were two pioneers in a sense that were showing this new school of art when other galleries were shy about it and were focused more on the European artists of previous decade. And Aaron's pictures at that time would have been mounted to a piece of wood and possibly varnished and hung on the wall just like a painting. And they would be hanging on the wall next to a Franz Klein in one of the galleries I've mentioned. And there would be no distinction, there would be no separation as you're looking at that exhibition, no isolation, or shall I say, no ghettoizing of his work because of his photography. And he was the only one at that time doing anything like this. This is considered one of his signature images from the series where he was photographing peeling paint. This was actually done in Arizona, and it was on a long road trip that he did cross country. I don't know if any of you here in the audience have studied photography, but there was a famous photographer named Frederick Sommer who lived in Arizona, and he and Aaron developed a friendship, and this was on a road trip where they went to, they were visiting ghost towns together. And Aaron went out photographing all day, came back to the car, completely sweating and spent, having shot many sheets of film, and Fred Sommer was sitting in the car, fast asleep. It looked like he had never left the car. And Aaron kind of shook him and woke him up and said, what's wrong with you? You have the whole day to go out and make art. What are you doing? And Fred said, oh, I got my art. I did it in the back seat from a dumpster that was behind an abandoned hospital. He had salvaged a whole box full of x-rays. And if any of you are familiar with Fred Sommer, he did a huge amount of work with x-ray film. And so that was a story that Aaron loved to tell. In the early 1950s, Aaron joined the faculty at the Art Institute of Technology, the Art Institute in Chicago, which was a school that was founded by Maholy Nagy. He was invited to teach out there by his friend Harry Callahan, who was a colleague, a photographer, a wonderful photographer in his own right, and with whom they would have a lifetime friendship thereafter. They met shortly before the summer of 1950, when Harry also suggested Aaron for the faculty at Black Mountain College. And Black Mountain College was this amazing school in North Carolina that would have these summer programs where they would invite amazing artists of all disciplines down, including not only in terms of visual arts, but performance art, dancers, poets. And Aaron taught there one summer. It was a summer where he had as students Robert Rauschenberg and Cy Twombly, both of whom said Aaron had a profound influence on their work and on that exchange that they had over the summer. Aaron that summer was going through a marital breakup or some relationship stress, and so he traveled around, and pictures that you'll see from. Sorry, I'll come back to this. Let's get it easier. No. All right. Never mind about the visuals, but in the catalogs that you have, specifically in the hardcover one called the Fragmentation of Language, you'll come across a lot of pictures that Aaron shot in North Carolina and Kentucky. Those were pictures that he made while he was teaching in Black Mountain College. And they have a darker element to them than some of the other work, and that is directly the response of his emotional life when he's going through that. It's also the beginning of the subject that that we call the Fragmentation of Language, and that was a title that we assigned to a show that we hosted in our gallery many years ago, and you have the catalog. And that was a big component of Aaron's work that would continue through the rest of his life, which was that in looking for abstractions out in the environment, often words, letters from words, signs, torn signs, were a huge component to his work. They really attracted his attention. And as I said earlier, he was a socialist. He traveled south of the border many times to Mexico. He went to South America, and he was always interested in political posters, especially political posters that were torn or painted over. That kind of distress really drew him in and was a large component of his art making. This piece of this is a crumpled up piece of paper, but it's very hard to decipher because of how tightly painted and propped it was lying on a city street. It had oil stains on it. But I don't know. When I look at this, I see William de Kooning. I see one of his famous women descending pictures. And to some extent, I would imagine, I think Aaron would probably admit that he had been influenced by some of his painting friends and they by his work. While he was teaching at the Art Institute in Chicago, he went off and did a number of other series that at first you would think would be unrelated to this abstract expressionist trajectory he's on. This one in particular, Pleasures and Terrors of Levitation, where he's simply photographing people jumping off of a diving board. But the way he printed these, the way he isolated the divers against a white sky, then he printed them very high key, very contrasty. He's transforming them. They become like these calligraphic gestures or figures. And so it's a form of abstraction as well. The image on the left, which is a Siskind, is titled Jalapa 66, and it's homage to Franz Klein. That was made in 1974, and this was put together by one of my staff members. You can see we're trying to make an argument how strong the influence from Klein was on a lot of his work. I mean, he even pays homage to Klein in the title of his work. But there was a very driven, conscious effort on Aaron's part to do in photography what his friends were doing on canvas. And I think he very smartly accomplished that. This goes back, I apologize if these are not in chronological sequence, but this is a picture from when he was working at the photo lead on the left, where he did a series on the Bowery, along the lines of what he did in Harlem, and a comparison with the Rothko. So again, here we're looking at organic forms he found in nature, rocks on Martha's Vineyard, but he is coming in tightly, isolating these shapes, building more tension in the frame, and creating a sort of an abstract dialogue using the negative space. A lot of people who view this picture see a sickle and think it's, especially knowing Aaron's background, think it might be some sort of subtle, not so subtle nod to communism. But it's actually a torn sign that's fallen and was sitting sideways on the ground, and it's the letter C with like a dark shadow area to make it more pronounced. This is another clever juxtaposition that one of my staff members came up with of photographed with the David Smith sculpture. And it's possible that these images were actually sourced from books about abstract expressionism, where Aaron has been very well recognized. Towards the end of his life, Aaron went out onto the roads of New England, like in Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and he started aiming his camera down at the macadam, at the asphalt, and at the swaths of tar. And he started to crop them tightly, and basically created the same sort of gestural images that he had done many years earlier with paint that he had seen on walls. But here he's looking at the tar and the roads. He was, at this point, he was in his 80s, and he had to go out with an assistant to redirect traffic so that he wouldn't get mowed over. Aaron was about 5 feet tall. He wasn't tall, obviously, but he was broad. He had a very driven and strong will to him. So I mean, if he wanted to do something, he was going to do it. If he wanted to walk into the middle of the road and take a picture and set up his tripod, he was going to do it. So he had to be protected, and thankfully he was. But this was the last comprehensive body of work he did. I mean, he's seeing things in the world that most of us would just take for granted. We wouldn't see. I mean, most of us are driving and we're not looking down, we're looking ahead, hopefully. But Aaron always was able to see things out there that few others would. And in photography, I can't speak of any other artist I know who's ever looked at the world the way he has. So there is a fabulous exhibition upstairs. I think it's on 4 different levels. It's a much better way to experience Aaron's work than through projections, because you can really get into the prints. He was a remarkable printer, and even when he started to delegate the printing to assistants, he oversaw every little nuance, and the prints are gorgeous. You feel as though you could reach out and touch and feel the textures that he's capturing. The pictures upstairs are fabulous pictures, and there's a nice cross-section of them that ranges from as late as the 1930s up until the 1980s. So it's a wonderful sampling, which I encourage you all to see. Any questions? Yes?
I wonder if you know anything about his commission he did in Bucks County to photograph for the Historical Society. I think that was early on, right?
It was very early on, and it was published as a book, which is extremely hard to find. They're beautiful pictures, and it's of the architecture of Bucks County. They have, in my opinion, they have a very distinct taste of Aaron in every one of them, even though they were a commissioned project. The textures of the structures of the houses, the way that he framed them, and the quality of the printing that he did for those, it's along the lines of his art. And The prints themselves are extremely rare as fine art prints. He actually realized very few of them, and when they come up, which is rare, they come up as vintage prints. I don't think he ever went back to reprint from those negatives. They command serious sums of money. Yes?
Did he ever share with you why he preferred the black and white medium?
He did shoot color. It's just, but it's very rare. And I don't know if he and I ever discussed it, but I would guess if I had to channel for him that he felt it to be a much more expressive medium, that you have more control in the processing, and that he felt, and I would say that as a printer, he felt he could pull out much greater tonal expressions from black and white than he could from color. He dabbled in color very late in his life. When he went down south of the border to take pictures, he was mesmerized by the colors that he saw in South America and in Mexico. And it was the first time he shot color film. But he never made color prints. He always had to rely on other people to do that for him. And I think for him that was surrendering some control that he wasn't comfortable with.
Did he always shoot film, or did he shoot roll film?
He actually, in terms of the volume of work that he created over his life, most of it was done as roll film. I think he shot medium format. He mainly worked with the Rolleiflex. Once he started to work with roll film, he just became very prolific. And when he went on to a site where he would mine it deeply.
So, I mean, you saw contact sheets from some of those.
Contact prints from early, well, the earliest work that he did was either 4x5 or 5x7 negative. And from those, there were some contact prints made.
The reason I'm asking is just interesting in his approach. Did he come up to the image, compose it, see it, capture it, then go to another one, or was he bracketing and taking different cropping the areas to produce different images from the same scene?
Good question. I believe when he was shooting with the roll film camera, he would take multiple shots. Having seen the contact prints, he would take multiple shots and he would crop differently in the camera. And he would come in closer to the subject matter, he'd move further away, he would move further down or up the street or whatever, looking at a different part of the poster. With the invention of a roll film camera, he was able to be much freer to experiment more. And then it became much more of an editorial process for him back in the darkroom.
He's approaching the photograph like a painter would, deciding on the size of the marks, and how much of the image is occupied by ground and how much by figure.
Yes. Any other questions about Aaron or photography? Cool. Thank you.
There are some refreshments, and if you want to see the exhibit, you can go on the elevator to the 5th floor, and you can come down. It's easier, and you can see the whole exhibit that way. There is also the mezzanine. You can come down. It's an easy way to see the whole express.